Want to know how slapdash Constantine's design was? When he was originally released on JP, this is what his NP looked like. You see that in the background? That's the Hagia Sophia. You see those spires? Those are called minarets, and they weren't attached to the Hagia Sophia until after Constantine died, if you catch my drift. Welcome back, nerds. Fino here with a guide for Constantine. No, not that Constantine. This is Constantine the 11th. The last Constantine. The last Roman, even. Fittingly for a servant based on such melancholic subject matter, Constantine is a mosaic of past glories and missed opportunities. His skill set is the very picture of an empire tearing itself apart, incoherent and ultimately insufficient. Our journey begins with Hagia Sophia's prayer. My understanding is that it's actually pronounced something closer to Hagia Sophia with a silent H, but if I say that too many times, you guys are going to tell me Gesundheit, so Hagia Sophia it is. This is a single turn taunt and NP gain combo that also dumps out 20 stars. Right off the bat, we have a contradiction between Constantine the Defender and Constantine the Attacker. Since he's a rider, you don't really run Constantine to give other servants stars, unless you're trying to hit the cap. So the idea, I suppose, is to leverage this into crits for the man himself. This is something that's hypothetically doable with his other skills, but not exactly practical. But let's set that aside for the moment. If you're actually trying to attack with Constantine, you don't necessarily want him to eat every attack for a turn. The wishy-washy NP gain effect is supposed to bridge these two ideas and let you pick and choose. But its single turn duration is kind of a sick joke. You're going to see a lot of those in this video. Next up, we've got Empire's Decline. This grants 3-turn buffs to party attack, buster, and specifically for Roman allies, crit damage. 30% on that last effect. Constantine himself counts as a Roman, so you could run him with another copy of himself, like a really shitty Van Gogh. You'll probably get better results running a different Roman. The most promising of these is Romulus Quirinus, who can spread the Roman trait to other team members. You could, for instance, start with him on the field, use his Noble Phantasm, and then swap him off for Constantine to get this effect going on a pack of non-Romans. Realistically, though, you're better off just running Romulus and Constantine together on the front line, since he has his own set of Roman buffs and synergizes with the general buster crit idea. We'll have business with the other Romans in a bit, but working out their synergies, or lack thereof, is something we can only do after seeing the other attractions in Constantine's House of Horrors. Next up on the list, Demise Privilege. This is a 30% battery that comes with 3-turn buffs, stars per turn, and personal crit damage. It also has an on-death component. If Constantine bites it while Demise Privilege is active, your rightmost ally gains that crit damage and star income effect. In other words, you can control the recipient by placing them in the rightmost frontline slot that isn't occupied with Constantine. In theory, anyway. One of Constantine's more unflattering qualities is that he has the bulk of a 5-star servant. While his health pool isn't too different from the other 5-star riders, it's large enough that his single-turn taunt can't guarantee a KO in most situations that don't involve eating a Noble Phantasm. You can try to trim the fat by making him an esports servant and keeping him below his maximum level, but Demise Privilege is his 3rd skill, the last one you unlock. So even if you were convinced about using Constantine as a disposable support, you'd be stuck with a lot of his inconvenient bulk. And Constantine is nowhere near good enough to justify running him with Goody-Goody Poster Girl just to get him off the field. Constantine's last chance of salvation is his Noble Phantasm. Theodosios Konstantinos is a non-damaging buster card that grants 3 turns of a buster buff and 1 turn of a single-hit invuln. Okay, a bit wishy-washy, but it works for the whole team. Right? Right? Nope, just him. At least for this part. But this NP does have party buffs. Single-turn burst defense effects, 5k flat reduction for Roman allies and 100% defense. If you remember the old Arash exhibition quest, you might remember that 100% defense, in the absence of relevant modifiers, is effectively invulnerability. You won't take any damage. That's a powerful concept, and if Constantine had come out in year 2, this might have actually seen some use. But Constantine loves his half measures, and you may have picked up on quite a few drawbacks. First of all, the only part here that scales with MP levels is the personal buster buff. Every other part of this Noble Phantasm is defensive in nature. But, let's throw in this buster effect because Constantine wants to be a buster crit attacker as a side hustle. This is just not a functional strategy at the moment. Constantine needs this to perform a buster brave chain, which if nothing else makes him sound like a bit of a Jekyll. If you're looking for a good beat stick, I suggest you look elsewhere. The good news, I suppose, is that you can safely leave Constantine at NP1, since that's all you need for defensive purposes, barring the odd start of turn charge drain gimmick. In those situations, being able to charge past 100% does have some inherent value. But even though we've abandoned our pretensions of using Constantine as an attacker, he's already dealt us a debilitating blow just for harboring that ambition. If you have a Noble Phantasm that's essential for your survival, you generally want ready access to it, and you want it to buy you time. Well, buster NPs aren't really good for access. You can't combo them into archchains to spread charge onto your frontline, and relying on Koyanskaya for your defensive team seems like a recipe for disaster. You could try to use Hagia Sophia's prayer, maybe let the enemies do some of the work for you. But remember, single turn buffs with a 6-turn cooldown. This guy just loves his single turn effects, doesn't he? Speaking of which, his single turn defensive effects, they don't really buy you much time in the first place. Sure, it'll get you through an enemy noble phantasm, but that's only one part of the equation. Enemies will chip you and crit you, and over time, you'll be bleeding quite a bit of health just from attrition. Constantine doesn't give you any kind of protection on these off turns, and he doesn't heal either. You're on a timer. Well, hold on a second, Fino, this is a solved problem. Get a Merlin for healing and a Castoria for coverage and boom! Immortal Rome. Bravo on that idea, but I've got a question. What exactly is Constantine's contribution here? He'd have to take the place of the overcharge support. Neither Merlin nor Castoria are Romans, and Castoria is way more reliable at stopping invuln pierce than Constantine. So what exactly does this guy do? He buffs Romans, I guess. Here you at least see the germ of an idea. Damage reduction adds a lot of durability to Nero, a servant that's already notoriously hard to snuff out. Caligula is extremely fragile, and 5k damage reduction could legitimately keep him alive. At first glance, it almost seems like there's room for our doomed hero to make his mark. But wait, Nero's an art servant at her core, and you have some mismatch with Constantine's Buster crit toolkit. That, and because of those pesky single turn effects, her defenses will actually outlast Constantine's protection. And with Caligula, he turns right back into a walking pile of glass once Constantine's buffs run out. That, and as a berserker, he's utterly incapable of collecting the stars that Constantine distributes. Evidently, the developers never thought to include targeted star absorption into this guy's kit. That's the thing with Constantine. His skill set is flying apart in so many directions that, aside from maybe Romulus Quirinus, his jank makes these combinations impractical even if there's an illusion of synergy. It doesn't help that Roman servants aren't generally meant to play nice with each other. For every Nero Bride or a Romulus Q, you have 3 other servants that either demand being your sole focus, or they want specialized teams to take advantage of their strengths. Karen, for instance, counts as a Roman by virtue of being connected to a Moor, but her setups leave very little room for needy tag-alongs like Constantine. You know what's fucked up? To promote Constantine, they added a number of temporary escort missions to the game. These forced you to run Constantine with another mandatory servant who you have to keep alive for a number of turns. The VIP is grafted onto your frontline, so you can't even swap them out. The idea is to showcase his defensive prowess, but if anyone had actually playtested this, they would have known that these are just an embarrassing showcase of all his deficiencies. Some of these fights are unironically easier if you swap Constantine out and try a half-assed arts loop. Looking at you, Caligula. But you see it all here. Constantine's questionable damage for one, but also that combination of short defensive buffs and inconvenient bulk that let him stay on the field but without any staying power. He has very little presence. He's really good at just barely staying alive while the rest of your team dies around him. Then, once he's got your sole attention, disappoint you one last time by going down in flames with no one around to get his death buff. Come to think of it, all those defense quest servants are on the leftmost slot, meaning they can't even get demise privilege. Not while you have a backline anyway. Ultimately, Constantine the 11th is a walking disaster of a servant that's harried by both his needlessly short buff durations and his clusterfuck design. Instead of making him a dedicated crit rider, or an immortal rider, or a more impactful Roman support, they spread him out between all 3 functions, making him largely ineffective at all of them. Even if new, stronger Romans come out in the future, I question whether Constantine would see any use. He's just that inept. Frankly, I think he's the worst 5-star in the game. FGO has no shortage of mediocre 5-star attackers and questionable half supports, but Constantine is another level of bad. Looking at his gameplay is like watching a Rat King. You know what a Rat King is, right? It's when multiple rats get their tails tangled together and they can't get free, so they start running in opposite directions but they can't get anywhere. Newton's a bitch like that. So in the end, they just starve to death. By putting Constantine in your party, you're asking for your team to become a Rat King. So save yourself some trouble and keep your courts for more worthwhile servants, like the ones I'll be rolling for this Sunday at twitch.tv/Finotaisen. Charlemagne, Kriemhild, and Roland, that exhibitionist bastard. You won't want to miss it. But returning to Constantine real quick, even though I've temporarily mothballed these servant history segments, this guy's got a great story, one worth learning about. So even though I can't promise it'll happen anytime soon, I'm very interested in circling back to Constantine's history down the road. But with that said, I'll see you next time.